Island habitats around the world are incredibly important for biodiversity, lending themselves to ecological niches and high levels of endemic species when compared to mainland regions. As a result, climate change has impacted island ecosystems disproportionately, with relatively small species populations more susceptible to extinction. Over 60% of recorded animal extinctions since the 1600s have occurred on islands. Hunting has become a controversial practice in modern times. My name is Dan Cabela, and I am traveling the globe to explore the true impact hunting is having on our remaining wild landscapes. This practice goes back as far as human history can remember. But does it have a place in modern conservation? Off the coast of British Columbia lies two Gulf islands, Mayne and Galiano, which offer a fascinating insight into the challenges of modern-day management and conservation in these unique landscapes. Chad Dyko lives off-grid on Galiano Island. A carpenter by trade, he is also a forager and hunting guide, adept at living off what the land provides. From his remote cabin, he lives connected to the flow of the seasons. It has allowed him to observe the intricate balance of nature through management and invasive species introductions. I am traveling to Vancouver Island before making the short boat journey to Galiano to meet up with Chad. The black-tailed deer of Galiano Island are deeply entwined both culturally and ecologically. A subspecies of mule deer, Chad has dedicated a lot of time to understanding the species. With no major predators, blacktail are managed on the island, both as a food resource as well as for the overall health of the ecosystem. With this in mind, Chad guided me through the forest to help me better understand the habitat. The best way to see the landscape is on foot, and the best way for me to slow down and absorb the surroundings is to be hunting. For Chad, the immersion into this landscape is from the forest floor to the tops of the canopies.
Lobster mushroom. Deer's been snacking on that one. This is a great ecosystem for deer, and it's not overbrowsed. This is an area where you'll grow a big buck, and there'll probably be less die-off and disease and stuff in areas like this opposed to areas like Mayne or other spots even on Galiano where the browse is significantly more pressure on it.
The great contradiction of invasive plants and animals is that sometimes they benefit native species while negatively impacting others.
This is Scotch broom. It's considered quite an invasive species. The seeds are supposed to last up to like 70 years or something of that nature. So we have massive efforts to clear broom out of conservation areas on Galiano. However, the deer really do utilize it in times when there's drought and when there's a lot of snow and all the ground's covered. The tips of the broom will still be poking out. So all the tips are nipped off, and you can see as it's growing, it's been nipped continuously because at the base of this plant it's actually reasonable thickness. So obviously it's a relatively important food source even though it is an invasive species.
While the blacktail have no predators here, they are impacted by disease, and that's something which is yet to be fully understood. Despite this, the population here is healthy, with yearly sustainable harvesting at a reasonably stable level. only armed with a shotgun as regulations dictate. The hunting is difficult.
Keep looking.
Yeah. With very little wind and thick cover, our sound travels easily, and the deer have ample opportunity to hide. Chad is careful and considered as he picks his way through the undergrowth. So much of it looks the same to me. But Chad has walked these forests for a decade. Just when I was wondering how small our chances were, an opportunity presented itself. We spotted a beautiful mature buck.
You know, we've been walking through these forests for, I guess about 4 days, and we've seen a few, but because we're using buckshot, you got to get pretty close. And they've always just been in front of us, and we've never been able to cut the distance. But we were walking through these ferns, very thick in here, being as quiet as we can, but you can only be so quiet. And all of a sudden, this mature buck just popped up in front of us, and luckily Chad saw him pretty quick and just said, shoot that buck. And I didn't have a lot of time to study him, but I had enough time to hit him. So he's down. We've got a beautiful buck over here, and looking forward to going over there and taking a look at him.
Got him.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Right on there. This guy's got a real proper body. He's got to be at least 5 or 6.
This beautiful native blacktail would add to Chad's protein take for the year and contribute to the harvestable surplus taken every year to maintain sustainable populations on the island. I was grateful for the opportunity to help. Understanding nature is so much about observation, and over the years, Chad has collected various blacktail skulls he has found. There's a lot to be learned, even from death. As the night draws in, we break down the deer I harvested and celebrate this lean, healthy wild protein with a hearty feast. Sharing a meal with friends with an animal I have hunted is one of my greatest pleasures, and it is the perfect way to end a long day. We worked hard for that blacktail, pushed it through and made it happen. And my hat is tipped to you guys for making that come true.
Cheers, Dan.
Cheers again.
Cheers.
While black-tailed deer thrive under management on Galiano Island, the ecologically similar neighboring island of Mayne is a very different story. In the early 90s, escaped fallow deer started to populate the island and began to outcompete the native blacktail. When regulation changed to only permit the use of shorter-range, less effective shotguns as the primary way of controlling fallow deer, the management of the species became more difficult. The tale of these two islands offers a perfect case study of how land use and management can impact ecosystems, and I am keen to learn more. Chad and I drive onto the ferry that will be taking us to Mayne. I am looking forward to seeing more of this beautiful country, and I enjoy the scenery as the ferry makes its way through the water. Here, the story of deer is very different. The invasive fallow are pushing out the native blacktail, negatively impacting the environment at large, and are proving difficult to manage.
The original idea for the person who brought the fallow deer was creating a fallow deer ranch. Fallow deer jerky was being made, the meat was being sold, and unfortunately they got out. And then they continued to breed, and that's where we are today.
So Dan, this is the original fallow deer farm. The locals call this the moonscape because very little grows here, and it's been many, many, many years since the fallow deer have been farmed on this land. They still do browse and graze, and you still do see them out there, but the amount of regrowth on this one particular plot of land is quite shocking compared to the rest of the island, how it always looks a bit like a moonscape. I mean, the stumps even out there, they don't really break down. Like, I haven't seen many other places where you have like bone white stumps sitting out in the middle of a field for like, 20 years. Usually they rot and degrade by this point. So this is definitely a very unique ecosystem that they've created, probably not very beneficial. So this is to demonstrate the difference between the understory that's been browsed by fallow deer and what it looks like when fallow deer are excluded from an ecosystem like this small one inside this enclosed area. You can visually see how much greener and more lush it is in there opposed to the outside. There is a fair number of ground nesting birds. They don't survive as well without that type of cover for their breeding and nesting, so it probably affects a lot of things in the ecosystem, not just plants, but other mammals and amphibians and things too. Those snowberries are an important food source for a lot of animals, including like black-tailed deer. That's the first time I've seen any white berries here on Mayne since we've been here. Well, they're all over Galiano for sure.
I speak to some locals to gauge their opinions and feelings about the deer population on Mayne.
Because they're beautiful animals, people get sentimental about it and don't understand that they were introduced here. They are not native to Mayne Island, and they are causing a great deal of damage.
Fallow deer are like opportunists in the sense that they'll eat the best stuff first, and that's often what the blacktails assist off of.
What you end up seeing are the black-tailed deer, in my estimation, are looking sicker and sicker.
And I used to help hay pretty much all the hay fields on the island. And this one farm, we used to get 3 wagon loads of hay off it. And after the deer got established in there, it got down as low as 1.5. So I finally got permission to hunt that farm, and we got her back to 2.5. So no, they're basically wiping out the farmers.
I'm a vegetarian, but I do not see any other solution. We talked about birth control. People were upset that, oh, maybe another animal might eat the birth control pills. Hunting seems to be the only solution.
The population's just going to keep escalating until there's enough organization amongst the hunters and distribution to be able to handle them all. If you have people that know the properties and you're able to get them in there and do the job, it's much more efficient. Some of the properties I've worked on have taken 30 or so, maybe a little bit more than that, and you can see the cover regenerating within a month or two.
The contrast with Galiano is stark, and it's clear that the fallow population needs a hands-on approach. With this in mind, Chad guides me on a hunt. I'm hoping to harvest a fallow deer of my own and help to manage this growing issue. On the way, we pass some high fences, and Chad explains how they are contributing to the problem.
So there's a lot of high fences being put in. It's pretty costly for the farmers, but their crops are diminishing year by year with the overbrowsing of the fallow deer. every time they put up a tall fence like this, they decrease the, area that the local or native blacktail can, forage on and stuff too. And then, other farmers, once they totally fence out all the deer, there's it's not even the greatest ecosystem because it kind of gets choked out and overgrown. So like a couple deer is good, but too many deer is bad. And then, that's the totality of that.
So it's a bit of a predicament. You've got deer that have really overpopulated the island. You've got people fencing the deer out of their places, but the deer don't leave. They're still here, still overpopulated. And hunting is probably one of the better management tools, the utilization of the animal. But it is a predicament, right? Because not that many people have access here. So to control the numbers, there's not that many permits, and really hunting hasn't even been around on this island for I mean, that's fairly recent, right? That they opened up hunting here.
Yeah, well, there was no hunting for a long time on this island, and then they opened up they gave 5 rifle permits out to locals, and those rifle permits have expired and they're non-renewable now. So that leaves like shotgun and bow with shot only. So it also, that decreases the amount of deer people are able to harvest, especially when they're fair weather deer and you got 30 of them out in the middle of a field. It makes it a bit more challenging to put them down for sure.
Not ideal weather, pretty windy, pretty wet. Saw a few does, but not really what we're looking for, so I guess we'll try another location, see if we can rouse something up.
With the weather continuing to close in, we use hides in likely locations to intercept moving deer. It is then a game of patience. We spot a blacktail, but no fallow within range. We will have to try again tomorrow.
Kind of our last morning out here chasing around these fallow deer. It's not raining this morning, so hopefully there'll be some out in the field, but we'll go and give it one more shot and see what we can turn up.
Once again, we spot them, but cutting the distance before they disappear back into the forest proves impossible. We are out of time and out of luck, so we decide to call it a day and head back. Chad gets news that a local guide, Tom O'Brien, has successfully taken a fallow close by.
All right, perfect eater.
Joe.
Thanks, Dan.
Pretty.
Yeah, it's a good-looking deer, right?
I'm struck by the beauty of the animal that lies at my feet. It's hard to comprehend that this small deer can cause so much destruction to the habitat. Tom explains to me that the meat from this harvest will go to the community and that absolutely nothing will be wasted. The meat and organs will be eaten, the bones will be used to make hearty bone broth for the sick and elderly. The brains will be used to tan the hide, and even the stomach contents will be used to make compost.
Got a nice stocking balls.
My trip to Galiano in Maine has taught me a lot about the impact of deer populations and how native species can be impacted by invasives. It has been a story of two halves. Galiano remains in relative balance, allowing a harvestable take of black-tailed deer for local people. Maine is suffering from overgrazing, with huge pressure on the environment. But effective management could turn this around and feed people in the process.